Hello. I'm not going to give my own opinion on the minimum wage. I'm just going to try to help clear things up and try to help out the situation. And I've decided to try to not have my fan on while doing this because it tends to be loud. Anyway, I'll start with the left. If you're arguing for the minimum wage, I do not recommend making the really horrible, oh, do you want to make 30 cents an hour or 5 cents an hour argument? I'll explain why later that's a bad argument. I'll just say now that if you say that to someone who's against the minimum wage, they will just think you're an economic illiterate and that you don't know jack about economics. And they won't take you seriously at all. Do not make that argument. You will fail. Failure is in store for you if you use that argument. Now, I've constructed an argument for pro minimum wagers that involves concessions, but I like to think is pretty good. What you should do is the concession you should make I don't think it's a big concession. And also, what you're doing is you're getting rid of an extreme position that's not necessary for your argument, that if you don't get rid of, the anti-minimum wager will use against you when you don't even need it. Basically, you should concede that there is a limit to how large the minimum wage should be. You should be like, yes, I understand that the minimum wage shouldn't be too high, because I get your point that if minimum wage is like $100 an hour, will destroy the economy and no one will get a job because no one will be able to afford to hire anybody. So I get that, Mr. Anti-Minimum Wager. You shouldn't raise it too high. But what you shouldn't, and here's the name of the argument that I think pro-minimum wage should use. It's called the equilibrium minimum wage argument. It goes like this. There is a certain point to where if you raise the minimum wage further than that point, the only result will be unemployment, and it'll make it harder for poor people to get jobs so that they can have the chance of moving up by getting work experience at crappy jobs and then moving to maybe better jobs. But also, I understand, Mr. Anti-Minimum Wage, that you talk about how the wages are created by supply and demand, but rich people through the government, you call it corporatism, I call it state capitalism, use their connections in government to screw with supply and demand when it comes to wages. And that's why at a certain point you have to have a minimum wage in order to, in case it gets corruption gets really bad, there's a limit to it. Like, it could literally be that through the corporate government partnership corruption, that people's wages could be really low, like absurdly low, due to their manipulation of the market through the state. So in a way, we should keep it at a certain point. We shouldn't raise it too much to the point to where your problem of unemployment happens, but we should have at least a minimum that moves up over time to stay with inflation. So maybe as a percentage, it stays as a percentage of GDP. But anyway, as a way of limiting or counteracting government corruption. In a way, it's a band-aid on an overall problem of corruption, but I think it's a very important band-aid and limit as a way to at least deal with the issue now, as we're trying to deal with the overall issue. So I'm not saying that the minimum wage is something we should always have, but we should have it now as a way to deal with this funky system we have now. You see, that's a good I think that's a good argument, because right there, you're not being aggressive. You're giving them a little bit of a concession that isn't even really a big concession to begin with, to be honest. It's not a big concession, but giving any concession is really useful, I've noticed. Like when I debate religious people, I always try to say something. Well, I don't always say. I only say it if I really mean it. But if I don't think that they're doing it, they're not going to say it. But I usually say something like, well, that's really good that you're asking questions like that. It's really good that you're asking questions about, ethics and meta-ethics and cosmology. It's really good that you ask these questions. We just simply disagree. It's very good to give out compliments when they're needed during a debate, because it helps build common ground. Which I'm still very skeptical of arguing with Christianity, because Christianity is just so foreign to my mind. It's just very difficult for me, I think, sometimes. We play by different rules, I think. But anyway, yeah, that's basically the point for the left that I think is pretty helpful. And for the right, I think mainly the arguments that the conservatives use for getting rid of the abolishing the minimum wage, pretty decent. Their argument basically goes something like this. If you get more work experience, it's easier to get jobs. And sometimes you have to start off with crappy work to eventually work up to better work. And if a job only justifies $5, like train you for later promotions, you're not going to get that job. So the conservative argument is that minimum wage laws hurt the poor because they take out the bottom rungs to the economic ladder, and we really want this economic ladder all the way down so that you can climb up it and get richer and richer and richer and richer. But if you make it illegal to hire poor people, because that's what they claim, that it makes it illegal to hire poor people, then this hurts the poor. So it's decent. It's a decent argument. I see what they're going with it. But I'm not going to say there's no problems with the conservatives. The problem with the conservatives, though, is that they make an oh, and by the way, that's where the 30 cent. Do you want to make 30 cents an hour? Why? It's a bad argument because they'll just retort with a well, if there's a McDonald's that'll pay you $10 and a McDonald's that'll pay you 30 cents, which one are you going to work at? You're going to work for the $10 one because supply and demand is what determines wages. Mostly. Corporatism messes with that. Anyway, that's why it's bad. But the problem that the conservatives make is the conservatives, they really, really need to, they have to make a concession too. Their concession that they should make is that they should show some skepticism of rich people. Because the problem with the conservative argument sometimes is that they come off as rich people idolaters, as if they're worshipping the rich, so that they can't do wrong. Or they say they defend their argument against abolishing the minimum wage by saying, well, their business, they can set whatever the wage they want. The problem with that argument and why it is not going to be very convincing to a progressive is that the second you say that, I can't speak psychology here, so I don't know for sure, but chances are pretty good that the progressive is going to think like discrimination, sexual harassment in the workplace. They're going to think a lot of nasty things about your statement. You do not want associated with your viewpoints. You're going to look like a jerk. You're going to look like a jerk, or just implying that employers can do evil things if you make that whole their business, they can make the wage whatever they want argument. So don't do that. If you want to try to convince someone that the minimum wage should be abolished, simply focus on the old it hurts poor people argument, because it makes it to where they don't even have a chance to start off with a crappy job. They're stuck without any job at all because they can't even get their foot in the door because the minimum wage is higher than than they're worth at the moment. Whereas if they were allowed to get if they were to get a job below minimum wage, they'd be able to get up work experience and be able to prove that they're viable members of society, and then they'd be able to justify themselves higher wages later on through work experience. So yeah, that's basically it. Some clarifications. I'm not going to tell you my views. You can probably guess my views from my previous videos, my overall world view. But basically, yeah, you both should try to understand each other better and try to really make your arguments clear. And you should give up extreme positions if they're not absolutely necessary. Only keep an extreme position in your argument if you need it, like if it's really fundamental. Thank you.